Is there such a thing as a perfect book? Yeah, I think there might be. I just finished my reread of Annihilation. I read this book in December, and when I read it, I said, give me a couple of months. I'm gonna reread this and then binge the rest of the series that's out currently. It was originally published as a trilogy, but we're getting a fourth book soon. When I read it, it became a new obsession of mine. On reread, it's heightened. It's so much more. It was so much better on a reread, and it was already a near perfect book on the first read. But on reread, I'm gonna go ahead and call it perfect. I just told my husband, this is probably in my top 5 favorite books of all time. It might be recency bias, but I don't know. His response to that was, what would happen if you read it a third time? And I said, I don't know, but I'm probably gonna find out really soon. This is a story of an expedition. There appeared one day about 30 years ago, there appeared a tunnel in a town. Mysteriously, no one knows why or how, but this area, deemed Area X, has been cut off from the rest of society and given over to nature. And it has changed over time. They've sent a series of expositions to go and map out the territory, record what they've learned, specialists, people who should be able to understand the terrain, the nature, the strange happenings here. But each expedition either comes back broken, the people come back broken shells of what they once were, or they don't come back at all because they either go mad and kill themselves or go mad and kill each other. Each expedition have kept their own journals mapping out their journey, what it looked like, their findings, and each time they send in a new expedition of people to try to understand this area and to try to figure it out because it's expanding, and the concern is that it could take over the entire Earth. So they go into this tunnel, or by our protagonist's eyes, it's a tower. It's important to her that people acknowledge that it is a tower to her, and they're just at the top, but they're going to descend down to the bottom of it. So this is such a creepy, unsettling, deep into your bones, claustrophobic book. From their first descent into the tower and what they find inside, impossible things, things that don't make sense, things that are indecipherable, a mystery, and what they discover about each other, the way this expedition is being run, the reflections they have of their own. We're following journal entries from our protagonist, who is the biologist of the group. And that's another thing. None of them have names. We never learn the name of our protagonist because Area X, one of the rules is we don't name ourselves. We don't give each other or ourselves names. We don't say our names. We are our occupation, our title. The quote, which I did write down, one moment please. I had not seen a name heard or spoken aloud for months, and seeing one now bothered me deeply. It seemed wrong, as if it did not belong to Area X. A name was a dangerous luxury here. Sacrifices didn't need names. People who served a function didn't need to be named. And always, the name was a further unwanted confusion to me, a dark space that kept growing and growing in my mind. So, from the first trip, from the first descent into the tower, to later when they explore a lighthouse, as they continue to peel back the mysteries of this place, as they continue to see more and begin to lose themselves in Area X, but also discover more of the previous expeditions and of what this place holds. It's so tense. That's the best description for this word. It's tense. It's not horror like jump scare horror. It's not horror like someone chasing you around with an axe. It's not horror like horrific things happening like body gore. It's horror. It's Lovecraftian. It's unsettling. It makes you feel uncomfortable, claustrophobic, like you're there and you're experiencing it alongside of them. And you do sometimes. There are times where the fourth wall is broken and where the journal entries that we're reading speak to us. Can you imagine? Are you seeing it right now? Are you here? Oh my golly. Whew, chills. I love this book so much. Wow. There are so many little details in this book that seem insignificant, but build and build and build until you get to the end and you can piece together some of these mysteries yourself. And then there are other things that are left unsolved. You end the book and you're like, but what does it mean? But what does that mean? The book withholds all the answers from you, but it should, because of what Area X is, because of the nature of what this book is. It has to hold certain things back because Area X is unsolvable. It wouldn't make sense for us to leave with all the answers. Oh my goodness. I just love this book so much. I think this is, it might be recency bias. I think this is one of my all-time favorite books, top 5 ever. I both and am excited to get into book 2 because I've heard that it's very atmospheric. Like, this book was extremely atmospheric. The way the lighthouse or the tunnel / tower or their camp or flashbacks of her past, memories of her past, the way things were described were so engrossing. I was there. I could feel it. I could taste it. I could touch it. And hearing that book 2 is even more so that, bring it, please. I've never been so in love with how, that's not true. Daphne du Maurier is another author that can sink me into a setting in a way that feels magical, in a way that feels impossible. I'm there. I am there. This book does the same. The difference is that this book puts me in a terrifying place. I'm both excited because I want that. I want more of that atmospheric feel, but I'm also nervous because I've heard that book 2 is really different from book 1. And truthfully, after finishing this book, my reread of Annihilation, I would like to just turn around and read it again. I'd like to start my reread, my 3rd read of this tonight before I go to bed. I want to begin it again now. I'm so addicted to this book. But do I want to do that? Do I want to just perpetually reread Annihilation over and over and over again? No. I should complete the trilogy. Right? I know I'm overhyping this book. I realize that. But I'd like, take it with a grain of salt. You're your own person. You can manage your own expectations. This is how I feel about this book. It's the most honest reaction I can give you. It's the most honest review I can give you of this story that I love so much. Honestly, I find it relatable too. There's so many red flags about this expedition. There's so many red flags about this story. But like, I don't blame her for going. You know what I mean? She's a specialist. She's a biologist. Why wouldn't she want to go to Area X and see what creatures are here and see what's happening here? Why wouldn't she want to try to solve the mystery? And yeah, people either come back undone or dead. It's true. But she would get to see what Area X was with her own eyes. I think I get it. I'm gonna be honest. It makes sense to me. I'm glad I got to see it through her journal entries though, instead of going on my own. Okay. Whew. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna do something different with this vlog. I should read all 3 books back to back to back. That's probably what's gonna happen here this week because I'm addicted. So rather than giving you a spoiler-free reading vlog of the 3 books, I think I'll make this an off and on video where you just got my spoiler-free thoughts. Now I'm going to give you some spoiler thoughts and then we'll dive into book 2. Spoiler-free followed by spoiler, etc. For the original trilogy. And I'll just have timestamps so you can skip the spoiler parts if you just want to live vicariously through me and see if the trilogy is worth it, or if you didn't love the first book but you want to see my joy. Oh, I hope I love the sequels. But anyway, there will be timestamps so you can skip according to your own needs. But I am going to talk briefly about some spoilers in this book. Wow. Okay, so spoilers for Annihilation begin here. Some of the highlights of this book. First of all, the first time descending into the tower. Easily I mean, incredible. Just the dynamics of this 4-person group of women and their suspicion over each other, their own kind of self-preservation that they have, trying to understand the situation, adds so much to the tense feeling of this book. But then actually going in and seeing the moss that's growing and spelling things out, getting their first encounter with this impossible tower that they go into, I loved. The flashbacks, the memories, the first time I read, I thought were the weakest part of the book because I found them a little bit dull sometimes. They drug on some of the time. Sometimes they were great, sometimes not so much. The second time around, I have no complaints. I have no complaints. It taught me more about her and her history and what got her here today. It taught me more about her obsession, her single-minded focus. It taught me more about her husband, which the first time I didn't know, obviously, because she withheld the information from me, that her husband was a part of the 12th expedition. 11th. The 11th expedition. I didn't know that the first time. So when she's talking to me about her husband in the beginning, I'm not like, what am I supposed to do with that? This time I'm paying attention to every little cue, every little detail, how their relationship is informed, how it affects everything, and knowing from the perspective as I'm watching them interact, knowing that he wrote his journal to her and trying to pick up on more of the subtleties of their life together. The lighthouse, easily the best part of the book. I don't know if that's actually true. It's all the best part of the book. The lighthouse, so if you don't know this about me, I already have a mild obsession with lighthouses. I love finding old lighthouses and doing anything I can to get close to them, even if it means taking a really long hike to go around to this piece of land that's like nearish. It doesn't matter. So I'm already just mystified by lighthouses. There's something magical. There's a siren's call for me to lighthouses. And them going into a lighthouse where there's blood splattered, there's writing on the wall, there's overturned tables, and there's clear sign of chaos, of struggle, of people who have become undone that have walked up those stairs. And as you walk up the stairs, you see things that have been discarded, things that are important, rations, water, food, memorabilia, sentimental items like a stuffed rabbit that must have been sent along with one of the people from the expedition because no children were ever here. And then when she saw the photo of the man, well, the lighthouse keeper, when she saw the, but she didn't know he was lighthouse keeper yet, when she saw the photo and she tried to imagine to herself, who was he? What was he popular? Was he shy? Was he ambitious? She was trying to manufacture based off of this photo what kind of person he was. And then she concluded at the end of it, none of it matters now. The hopelessness that's captured in this novel pairs with the tense, claustrophobic feeling of being stuck in Area X and having no idea if you'll ever get out. Having your identity, your name stripped of you, because that would be a hindrance to have personhood put on these people who serve a job, who have a purpose. And then she sees someone and she tries to project personhood on him based off of his picture, but then she cuts herself off and realizes it doesn't matter because of what Area X is to people, what it does to people. He's gone anyway. And then she gets up to the room and she finds the journals. Too many journals. More journals than could ever have been written in 12 expeditions. More journals than ever could make sense. Why are there so many journals? How many people have been here? What is the history of this place? I love that. I'm sorry, I'm just now noticing my tone and my intensity. I'm going to dial it back a little bit. I love that so much of Area X doesn't make sense. Feels impossible. So much of Area X is a mystery in and of itself that the more you uncover, the more expansive it is, the more impossibly large it is. I love that about Area X. I love how unexplainable it is. And she found her husband's journal. She didn't want to read it at first. She wanted to read through other journals first, but eventually does learn that he was in fact writing to her. We continue on. We get to talk to the psychologist. The psychologist also has such a strong sense of what does it matter about her. Oh, I forgot to mention. That was what I referenced in the spoiler-free part when we were in the journal room and she was talking about just the sheer number of journals. And she said, can you imagine? Perhaps you can. Perhaps you're staring at it now. The idea, oh my gosh, the idea of her journal being left in that room among all the other journals. And as she's writing, she's not writing to someone. She's just writing to the journal, to whoever might pick it up. And in her mind, whoever picks it up next, it's going to be someone on the next expedition. Someone who finds this room and starts reading through the journals, just like she did, just like the psychologist did, just like so many people before them must have done. And hers will now be in the pile too. And it might be me next. Am I the one reading the journal? Whoever it is has picked hers up. Oh, I love the detachment there. I love that sort of, it's not really breaking the fourth wall. It's not actually that. Because we know we're reading the journal, and she isn't speaking directly to me. She's speaking to whoever picks this journal up next. Oh my goodness. Oh, chills. Okay, anyway, sorry, the psychologist. The psychologist was such an interesting aspect of the book because she still wanted to figure out the mystery. She still wanted the mystery of the biologist. She still wanted to ask her protagonist questions, still wanted to try to understand her, but she also had this apathy about her that when the biologist would ask her questions, try to understand what the psychologist had figured out, she refused to answer. She sort of just became very apathetic, and it kind of added to that sense of what does it matter? What does it matter here at the end? I'm done. You're gonna be done soon too. I loved the scene too when she went back to camp and there was a grave dug and a makeshift cross over it, and she was trying to decide, was that grave for me or was that for the psychologist? And she's going through the motions and she starts laughing, and she remembers back when her husband first came home from the expedition and he was a shell of himself and he was so disconnected from the world, and she just continued about life, making spaghetti, scraping the spaghetti and the chicken into the trash, and just laughed at the mundanity of her everyday life while her husband was stripped of his very self. He was a shell, and here she is watching herself become undone, and yet she still has to go through the mundane things in life. Back to the psychologist, I also really loved the line, we had all been given self-destruct buttons, but the only one that could push them was dead. Oh, so good. There was another quote that I loved. I have so many quotes. Death was not the same thing here as it was across the border. Oh, so good. It was such a good one. I have more quotes. Hold on. I have more quotes on my laptop. Okay, so we have the scene. There shall be a fire that knows your name, and in the presence of the strangling fruit, its dark flame shall acquire every part of you. There's just so many good lines in this book. Okay, quickly, the last scene that I want to talk about naturally is going to be with the crawler. It was, I mean, everything about this book, I keep saying the word and I can't stop saying it, everything about this book was claustrophobic. Everything about this book, I was there. I was right there with the biologist, feeling trapped, but also feeling intrigued, like I needed answers. I had to keep moving, but also knowing that the end was likely coming. Every new revelation, every new mystery, every new impossibility that was revealed, I was right there with her, confused, obsessed, knowing that this was bigger than I would ever be. And the crawler is a great example of this. What do you do when your senses don't work? What do you do when not don't work? What do you do when your senses aren't enough? What do you do when you can't even lock your eyes on the thing? It keeps shifting, it keeps changing. What it is incomprehensible. And so what you're seeing and what you're comprehending, what your mind is able to produce as an explanation isn't enough to the point that reality doesn't seem like reality anymore. As I adjusted to the light, the crawler kept changing at a lightning pace, as if to mock my ability to comprehend it. Its figure was within a series of refracted panels of glass. It was a series of layers in the shape of an archway. It was a great slug-like monster, ringed by satellites of even odder creatures. It was a glistening star. My eyes kept glancing off of it as if an optic nerve was not enough. The unexplainable, the mystery of it all, the questions that I still have add to the tension that I feel from this scene. The Lighthouse Keeper too, that was the quote that I gave in the spoiler-free section when she learned the Lighthouse Keeper's name, and it was very disturbing to her. It was very unsettling, because what Area X does is it takes, and it takes to the point that the people who go there are undone. They're unraveled. They're not themselves anymore. So the fact that this Lighthouse Keeper's name had somehow been maintained in Area X was so deeply unsettling to her. It was so deeply disturbing to her, because it's the antithesis of what Area X is to people. I love it. Oh my goodness. And then she stayed. She stayed. The story ends with the biologist remaining, knowing that her days were numbered, and they were numbered here. I have so many questions left. I have so many questions left. And there's a piece of me that deeply wants a Vandermeer commentary. I want him to write a commentary that's as long as this book, or release a book that's twice the size, that has a commentary next to it, so he can just explain everything, so he can expand on everything. I want that, and I also deeply don't want that, because the mysteries are half of what makes this book so good. Okay, back into the spoiler-free section. I am going to continue on with book 2, but honestly, it's begrudgingly. I'm doing it because I know I should. I'm doing it because I know that that's the correct course of action, but not because I don't want to just turn around and start my reread, my third read of this, because that's really what I want to do. I just want to keep reliving this book over and over again. But instead, I will read book 2, and I just really hope I love it. Whew. Book 2. Here we go. I have completed book 2. So we already talked about Annihilation. This is the spoiler-free chat for Authority, which I just finished, and I've already started Acceptance, but I'm not very far in. I meant to talk to you about this before I started this, but I've lost all self-control. So this follows. Okay, so I mentioned when I was talking about this, we have our expeditions that go forth, go into Area X and explore. Most people who go through those expeditions die, and the few that do come back, they come back a shell of who they once were. Now we're following someone who works for the government, and who the people that they're able to recover, the people who do come out of Area X, he's trying to interview them, specifically one that he's fixated on, trying to understand Area X better, trying to recover as much information as he can, because they've been trying to figure this out for 30 years. So the main character that we're following, his name is John, but he goes by Control. It's a nickname that his granddad gave him when he was a kid, but it's also a reflection of the control issues that he has in his own life. He didn't have a lot of control growing up, moving around a lot, unstable home, a mother who is very distant. Now his mother is a high-ranking government official, and she's the one who put him on this job basically as a last chance. So he now is interviewing someone who survived a previous expedition. There we go. That's how I can say that. I won't tell you who, I won't tell you which expedition, but someone survived a previous expedition, and he is conducting a series of interviews to try to understand Area X, because that is his one goal. That is what the government has been working on for 30 years and has gotten nowhere. So we're following his perspective while he conducts these interviews, as well as follows a series of clues outside of those interviews, like things that he finds in drawers, writing that he sees on the wall, odd circumstances, and just more mysteries are being presented. A couple of answers are also given, and then just more mysteries. Just forever we don't understand this place. I will say that this was definitely a step down from Annihilation, which I fully expected. I mean, it would have been ridiculous for me to expect the sequels to live up to this because, again, perfect book. This was probably a steep step down while still being very good. This book is under 200 pages, and this one is a little bit over 300. So I think that if this book had been more the size of this one, that would have helped it a lot, because while I love learning through someone who has a lot more information than just someone going on an expedition, someone who can look at the files and files of information that they've received and can compile it all and try to understand it all as a data sum instead of individual parts like someone who's in the expedition might do. While I love learning the inconsistencies, like this person views the entrance of Area X as a straight, narrow, short entryway, and then the next person views it as a long, winding, very seemingly never ending, right? Like the inconsistencies of people's reports and memories, I love getting to see from the perspective of someone who has more information. But following a government official who's compiling data points is significantly less interesting to me than an explorer or a biologist who is going into the mouth of the beast of the mouth of the beast. What's the going into Area X? So I did still really enjoy this because I really enjoyed because Area X is such a fascinating place to me. So learning more about it in whatever format I can is fascinating. And there were a lot of clues that we were given that I wanted to understand. And we did get some answers, and then there are other things that we didn't get an answer for that I'm going to speculate with you about when I get to the spoilery section. There were some really creepy scenes. There were some really effective scenes. One particular reveal that I absolutely didn't see coming, even though all the clues were there, I just didn't see it. So overall, and a very good ending, which is why I couldn't just not start the next book. Overall, I think that this is weaker than book one, but still as a whole fantastic, though I do think that it could have been trimmed down, especially because the perspective and the way we got the information just wasn't nearly as interesting to me. But again, Area X is interesting enough that I'm thrilled to get the information that I got regardless. And I have high hopes for book 3 based off of how book 2 ended. So those are my thoughts on book 2. If you want to skip the spoilers, then you can use the timestamps to do so and skip right to my thoughts, my spoiler-free thoughts on book 3 once I finish that, to give you an idea of if I'm satisfied with the conclusion of the trilogy. I expect the conclusion to have very few answers. I think this is just one of those series that Area X is bigger than we are and bigger than our comprehension or our understanding could ever reach. So forever it will be Area X, that which we do not understand. That's my speculation. So I don't expect this to be a trilogy where we get satisfying answers. I expect it to be a trilogy that leaves us wondering. And I would love that. So, spoiler thoughts. Use the timestamps to skip over this section if you would like. Okay, spoiler thoughts. A few things about Control. I really enjoyed the parallel of his name and his personal journey. For instance, like I mentioned in the spoiler-free section, that he kind of grasps at control, and having to relinquish that was a big part of him being able to get anywhere in this story. He wanted to have control over his colleagues, and his colleagues, especially Grace, there was a lot of friction there. He wanted to have control over this project, and he wanted to dominate it, understand it, but it was releasing the need to fixate on these little, tiny little details and instead understand it as a whole, know all the history of it, and not just fixating on the lighthouse or on the entrance, fence or on the tunnel / tower, but instead taking a step back and looking at it holistically is what could begin to get us somewhere. It was releasing control over the tower itself, I'm sorry, Area X itself, and recognizing that it is ununderstandable, but then also releasing control over his life. I think the ending where he goes to Ghostbird, sorry, I almost called her Grace, where he goes to Ghostbird, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, I assume you've read it, so you know what I'm talking about, when she's about to enter into Area X again, and he tells her, I know who you are, I know what you're about, I don't care, I accept you. And then he chooses to go by John again, and he strips his control on the outward as a reflection of the release of control totally right before he enters Area X himself. So I really, really liked that parallel that kind of followed him throughout the duration of that book. I liked watching him slowly realize that releasing his control was the only way to get anywhere with Area X. His relationship with the biologist, with Ghostbird, was so... Okay, first of all, when I realized that there were 3 survivors of Expedition 12, and he was going to be interviewing the main character from book 1, I thought, I was so excited because I thought she was lost. I didn't think she was coming back in sequential books, which she still may not. But I was so excited to, I thought, have her back and find out what happened to her, when in fact, she's gonna give us no information. She'll be totally tight-lipped and really stubborn, very obstinate. And as he continues to try to ask her more questions, we find out she doesn't know anything. She doesn't remember anything about Area X, except that it was... What was the phrasing she kept using? It was like a pristine wilderness, I think is what she was calling Area X, which I have thoughts about. So, I'll talk about in a minute. So she kept calling it a pristine wilderness. She said the only thing she remembers about her last moment, or the last thing she remembers about being in Area X is drowning. What? Is the original biologist gone? Did she drown in order to create, like, did you drown her after you created her clone? I don't know yet. We might find her in book 3. We might find her. Oh my golly, what if we find her? And then the 2, oh, that's probably what's gonna happen. Okay, sorry. So, anyway, she remembers drowning, which this is the clone that remembers drowning, but she does have some of, so she has some of the memories of, previous biologist, but they're fractured, and she doesn't really remember her husband. She doesn't really remember her life before Area X, which makes sense. She's asking for these books on, what was it, camouflage, mimicry, and what was the 3rd book she wanted? I don't know. Something that was a really good clue. Why do you want these specific things? Why do you need to know how to trick people, essentially? I don't know. I didn't think anything of it, honestly. Oh, memory loss. Memory loss was the other thing. Daggone. And then the rabbits. What's funny is I was paying attention to the rabbits because there's a rabbit on the cover. I was like, okay, so those matter. So pay attention. So they enter the rabbits, they throw a bunch of rabbits in there and they breed at an impossible rate. And they, the scientists, the people, the government officials, they tried to have control over the rabbits, but because they bred at such an impossible, unexplainable rate, they just surrendered their control. They surrendered their desire to handle these rabbits, and they were just like, all right, you live here now, right? So in my mind, I'm like, there you go. That's the parallel. That's the significance of the rabbits. Control is surrendering his own control over Area X, or his desire for control over Area X and over his own life, his own self. And the rabbits are just a parallel symbolism to that. No, they were a clue. They were a clue that Area X is cloning things, and it went over my head because I'm searching for symbolism instead of clues, you fool. And it was the clones. So we've been dealing with a clone of the biologist this whole time. It was a twist I did not expect. Oh my goodness. And when Ghostbird started telling us, I'm not the biologist. If you have questions for her, ask her. I'm not her. She's not here. I was like, what do you mean? I didn't get it until the book spelled it out for me because I'm stupid. So it was a great reveal. Oh, it was so good. Then the section where Control just kind of fell into self-indulgence, self-destructive habits, just stopped taking care of himself and was self-destructive. The whole section, hello? What was I saying? So he lost himself. And so there was the voice. That was an interesting factor of this book. The scene where he realizes, oh my goodness, he realizes that he's been under hypnosis this entire time because they were trying to keep him focused. And when he addressed it to his mom and she was like, yeah, so. So. And so when he has that call with the voice and he's like got this series of air horns going off so that he can't fall under the influence of hypnosis, that scene was great. Another scene that I really loved was, do you remember near the end when Whitby started kind of succumbing to losing himself as well? And when Control went back into the storage room and found the trapdoor and then went in there and it was all like red markings, possibly blood, all over the walls, and he had created these sort of like monsters. They were like monstery creatures, and then he had printed his co-workers, the workers of Southern Reach, over the top of these monsters that he had created. Control's was, I think Control's was a rabbit as well. I mean, I think his was, I don't remember what Control's monster was. But anyway, then he sees like there's a cooktop and there's a sleeping area and he's like, someone's living here. And then he feels breath on the back of his neck and he turns and he sees Whitby crazed, just laying there staring at him. And it's like this like feral sort of moment, and Control has to suppress all instinct to back away or to run, and instead he just turns his back on Whitby and starts to slowly walk, and then Whitby reaches out and pats his head. Oh my goodness. And then he left. He went back out and he took the ladder with him, and then he realized Whitby's getting up here without the ladder. Somehow. Like, oh, it's so interesting because Whitby is the one that presented the theory to Control, the not terroir, I wouldn't know how to say it, but the wine term, which was the concept of stop looking at one thing. You have to look at the data sum in order to understand it. He was the one that presented that theory that informed the course that Control took throughout the duration of the book, and yet Whitby is also descending quickly. Another scene that I really loved was when Control was able to see the found footage of other people who were on the expedition, and he watched people like start babbling in another language. He watched people lose their minds on film. He heard screaming off camera. The footage kept going in and out and was getting static. There were just so many. It's one of the few times that I'm reading a book and I'm thinking, I wish I could see it. Like, usually reading a book is a more immersive experience for me than watching a movie is. Personally, I know that's like not normal, but that is true for me. This is one of the few occasions where I'm reading something and I'm like, I gotta see it. I need to see this found footage. I have to experience it. It's terrifying. Oh yeah, also the door that Grace told Control led to nowhere, and then once Control does move aside the bookshelves and actually opens up the door, and he finds that it's this scrawl of writing that seems to be endless. It just goes on and on and on, and with it is also a hand-drawn map. And when he asks Grace about it, she's like, it's nothing, I think. It was like deflection, I think was her response, and then threatening to blackmail him. And it ended up being that it was the lighthouse keeper. And it was that this is a series of his old sermons that he just scrawls on the wall. So like, how long has Saul been the lighthouse keeper? How long has he been trapped here? What purpose has he held? What's the history of Saul? And does he leave? How far can he go? Was he here? I have many questions about Saul. I have started book 3, so I think I'm gonna get some answers soon. Also, the last thing that I want to talk about is that in the old directors, which I haven't talked about the old director at all, Cynthia, who's gone into an expedition as well. In the old director's drawer, at one point, Control opened up the drawer and found a plant and a dead mouse. So I'm an idiot, and I didn't pick up on the clues of the clones because I was looking for symbolism, and I'm gonna keep doing that. So with the plant is indestructible. They tried to torture it. They tried to not feed or water it. They tried not to water it. They tried to kill the thing, and it seems to be unkillable. That's pretty interesting. And then we have the dead mouse. So here's my suspect. Here's what I suspect. I think that this is meant to be an indicator. So symbolism is the wrong word. I'm trying to read meaning into clues. Okay, cool. So I think the plant, which is from Area X, is meant to indicate to us that Area X is indestructible as a whole. It's not dying. It is expanding, but it's not dying. But if you put a living creature with the plant, guess which one dies? It's gonna be the thing that's not the plant. So I feel like this is an indication to us that it's not just that there is no understanding Area X. It's also that there is no overcoming Area X. It overcomes. It will continue to spread. It will continue to live and branch out and grow, and you will be choked out. And I think that was also kind of reinforced with some of the final scenes where Control, when he goes to open up a door and the door's gone and the doorknob's gone and the wall is breathing and he realizes that Area X is expanding. So he tries to go get Grace, he tries to go get a couple of colleagues to get them out of here, but they end up succumbing to Area X and becoming a part of it, I guess. So he has to run on his own. And I feel like that's kind of reinforcing what I could be way off base. I feel like that's kind of reinforcing what the mouse was showing us, which is you will eventually be overcome by it. So I think the way this trilogy is going to end is going to be Area X is going to keep growing, and watch out, humanity, because you are not bigger, you are not stronger, you are not smarter. Area X is going to be the end. I also, and this may be a reach, but the ghost bird kept mentioning, or she mentioned a couple times, she said that the only thing that she could remember about Area X was that it was a pristine wilderness. I'm almost positive that's the phrasing she used, a pristine wilderness. And she's from Area X. She was created there, and that's what she's calling it. So Area X is obviously a living, breathing entity of sorts. Like, it is alive. And it is unknowable, and it is ever-changing, and it is dominant. But I also wonder if it's, like, correct. Does that make sense? You know? Like, humanity has pushed back nature in order to create its own civilization, because humanity is the biggest, baddest, smartest, bravest, bestest, we like to think. And a lot of sci-fi that I've read, a lot of my favorite sci-fi that I've read, has been introducing the idea that, but maybe not. Maybe humanity isn't the winner in all races and all battles everywhere. Maybe there's something in outer space or something right here that is in fact stronger and that does actually win. So I don't know, but maybe Area X is the pristine wilderness saying, you're done pushing me back. I'm taking my space back, right? Like, is that stupid? Am I being dumb? I know that Area X is expanding. I know that Area X is seemingly indestructible. It doesn't seem like it's going to stop expanding, and it does seem like when it's put in a space with something else, it dominates. It squashes, it wins, and it can pretty much do what it wants. So I wonder if this book is going to end with Area X is the winner and the owner of this earth. And like Control and Ghostbird and others have to release control and just become a part of Area X. I don't know. Sorry if that's really off base. I might edit all of that out. So anyway, Authority. Oh wait, no, not Authority yet. Let me just real quick. I'm almost done with spoilers. This has been long. Last thing is I really loved the ending where Ghostbird gets away and Control decides that he wants to find her. And I kind of already mentioned this. He tells her, I don't care that you're a clone. I don't care that you're not the biologist. I don't care that you're not who I thought you were. I know who you are. I've spent all this time bonding with you. I've spent all this time knowing you. You know, I care about you. And her response is, neato, I won't shoot you now, but also I need to figure out who I am. So I have found the new entrance to Area X. This is where I'm going. And then she dives in. And Control releases Control and dives in too. So now Control is in Area X with Ghostbird. So while I do genuinely believe that Authority could have been condensed, I think it could have been a 200-page book. I think that there's quite a bit of, you know, side things that happened that probably add a lot to the story. Maybe I'm off base, but there's just stuff that, a great example is after he escaped Area X and he went back home and his mom was there, it was nice to know that his mom actually cared about him, but that conversation with his mom and then the travel to get to, I don't know, I love how descriptive Vandermeer is. I love that he takes his time to really immerse you in everything that's happening. But for the perspective we were following, I just didn't think that we needed this much. I might be off base. But anyway, while there were parts of the story that I didn't find as gripping, there were so many parts that I found incredibly gripping. So I still really, really enjoyed book 2. So I've already begun Acceptance. Honestly, I'll probably finish it today. So I'll see you probably tonight to wrap this video up. Okay, final book, Acceptance, I finished. This is probably gonna be the shortest chat of the 3, even though it's possibly the one where there's the most to talk about. And that's because I have completed this book 2 seconds ago, and my thoughts are, what? Like, what did I just read? I don't know, but I'm gonna have to ponder it for a really, really long time. So Acceptance is very timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. We're splitting this between a few different perspectives, and we're going back to the beginning. Like, timeline-wise, we're going, this is the first book, and then we progress, and then we go backwards and we learn the beginnings of many things, which eventually takes us to where we just have a lot more, we just question a lot more, we just wonder. So, I don't know. This is a cosmic horror, sci-fi, cosmic horror / sci-fi trilogy. So it's not like boo, scary. It's very just like the universe is big. The possibilities of what can happen are beyond us, and what you think the boundaries are to what can happen are wrong. You're wrong. It's wrong. So that's what this book was, and it was weird. It got weird, but it also was really, really cool to see the beginnings of a lot of things. So, spoiler-free, was it worth it? Yes. I very much enjoyed this trilogy. Annihilation, I think, can't be beaten. I knew that when I went into the sequels. I knew that there was no beating this book. It's just perfect from my perspective. And the sequels, I would say, if you are obsessed with book one and you just need to know more, then here you go. Take the sequels, but it's not going to really answer anything. It's not going to answer very many things. It's just going to expand. And you're going to roll with it, and then you're going to finish and you're going to say, what? At least that was my experience. Now, I'm going to jump into spoilers a little bit, and then you can use the timestamps to skip to my final thoughts if you want to. All right, I'm going by perspectives because that just seems like the best way for me to process this book. First of all, Saul. I did not expect, when I read book one and I met this lighthouse keeper / crawler, I certainly did not expect to be able to see this much more of him. I didn't expect to get a perspective on him, a backstory on him. I didn't expect to see him pre-condition of book one. This was such a surprise and a treat, and what? So getting to see him when he is, you know, being a lighthouse keeper, doing his own thing, having his own life, and Grace, this little girl, is a part of his life, and then he gets pricked by the flower thing, and it starts to transform him and change him. And that scene at the bar where the brightness was affecting other people as well as him. And so here's my interpretation of Saul, because there was a lot that happened here. My interpretation of Saul, and I would love to hear your thoughts because I just don't think I understood this book, is that the scene at the bar was the brightness affecting people around him to the point that it freaked him out, it scared him. So he ran away and isolated himself to protect other people because he didn't want it to harm the people that he loved. And as he continued to be transformed so much to the point where he was becoming a part of Area X, was the border, my interpretation, what I think is that the border was Saul, because now Saul is a part of Area X. So the border was Saul trying to keep people out because because Area X continues to go out in the world and affect people and sort of bring people into Area X and create them as a part of the ecosystem, right? Part of Area X, like, you humans have to adapt to me, is what Area X is doing. And Saul doesn't want the humans to be affected in this manner and to have their sense of self destroyed and have them twisted into something else. So he's trying to keep them out by creating that barrier. Am I really off base? I might be really off base. I do wonder if his scrawlings... I also find it interesting that the confrontation that he had at the top of the lighthouse, you know, between Saul and Henry, was the name? And Henry fell, well, they both fell, and Henry died and Saul lived on. But he fell down and then the tunnel was created / tower. I do wonder if him writing the scrawlings all over the place was him kind of keeping a sense of his identity in the midst of becoming a part of Area X. Anyway, getting the backstory on Saul and seeing him pre-Area X, how he became involved in it, and then how he developed the role that he plays as the crawler. All of that was so fascinating, even though I can't pretend to understand it. Next up, let's talk about Control and Ghost Bird. So fascinating that time moves different inside Area X. So even though Ghost Bird has been outside of Area X for a very short time, Grace has been inside Area X for 3 years. That's fascinating to me. Also really interesting, so we got to see the biologist's last will and testament, so we got to see what happened to her in this way. And I expected, after we learned about clones in book 2, and I forgot to mention it when I was recording about it, but I expected that the man who went home and the biologist in book 1 when she had flashbacks with her husband. I thought that must be a clone based off of the way Ghostbird was acting and how fragmented her memories were, and just some of her cues seemed really similar to the biologist's husband's cues after he returned from his expedition. So the fact that she thought the same after she entered Area X, to me, pretty much confirms it. Interesting that her husband, she thinks, was turned into an owl. And I think it's probably true because Area X, because time works differently here, some people were able to escape Area X, a shell of what they once were. I'm gonna go ahead and suspect that everyone who was able to escape Area X or was able to leave Area X, they're all clones. I don't think anyone made it out. I think everyone is still here and they've all been turned into creatures. I also wonder if what Whitby was writing on his wall, where he created these creatures on his wall and then stamped the Southern Reach people's faces to them, was that Area, he saw what was inside of Area, he knew what Area X was doing. Probably maybe he was already being transformed by Area X little by little and it was affecting his mind and he just knew what was to come. And so he was mapping out what everyone was going to be. Maybe I'm like way off base there. But a lot of people, the people who are sticking around, they're becoming a part of Area X too. Whether they become a piece of it like Saul has, or like the other people did, or if they become a creature that live within it, like the biologist, after she had spent 30 years with what she thinks is her true husband in owl form. I wish I could remember what creature control was scrawled on in red in Whitby's little secret room in book 2. I wish I could remember what control was. I thought he was a rabbit when I was trying to recollect when I recorded the last video, but now I wonder, because that's not what control turned into in book 3. So I don't know if that truly was like a future sight type of thing that Whitby was functioning off of, or if it was just nothing. It could have just been nothing. But anyway, control starts being transformed into a creature himself and then he dies. Or I guess he didn't die necessarily. He could show up in the 4th book that Vandermeer is writing right now, because he went to the base of the tower, saw the flower that started this all, the one that pricked Saul, and then he dove into the light. So actually, he'll probably show up in book 4 because we have no idea what happened to him. He could be like a key piece of Area X in this. Do you think in book 4 they're gonna defeat Area X? I kind of don't want them to, if I'm honest. I did really like that for Ghostbird and Grace's resolution, their final perspective, that they really just weren't sure what Area X was going to be. Is Area X going to continue to expand forever, or is it going to stop eventually? There's just no knowing because Area X is bigger than them, and so it's just impossible to be able to predict. And I like that Ghostbird is kind of like, I don't care, you know, it is what it is. At this point, Area X is going to do what it does. What are we going to do about it? And that Grace still had so many ties to the real world and the people that'll be affected, and so it mattered to her. So I'm really excited to see how what happens in book 4. The other perspective is Gloria / Cynthia and Lowry from the first expedition, and they found the cell phone implant. The cell phone, so the cell phone, Lowry is accused of using the cell phone to communicate with Area X. Editing Murphy here. I didn't complete that thought very well, so I'm doing a voiceover. What I was trying to say here is, so it is confirmed that this is in fact Lowry's phone, and the thought is that this phone was being used for Lowry to communicate with Area X, so, and possibly receiving orders from Area X. So with Lowry being the founder of these expeditions, that, I mean, the implication here is that Lowry didn't create this system and these expeditions to assist the government in understanding Area X, but instead, this whole thing has been to assist Area X. So, with this single reveal, the implications are that everything we've understood about the expedition, the perspective has now shifted. These expeditions were maybe not actually scientists trying to understand this thing that could potentially be taking over the Earth if we can't figure it out, but instead these expeditions are feeding the thing, right? That shifts everything. That changes everything. Gloria / Cynthia / the director / the psychologist going into the 12th expedition with the letter in her pocket for Saul, hoping to find him, hoping to be able to tell him, I'm sorry I never came back. I appreciate you. You meant something to me. The ending on that note was really effective. It was such a great emotional note for her story to come to an end. And of course, it's so sad that she never actually got to him. She never actually got the note to him. And if she did, how much would he understand or be able to recognize or remember? I'm not really sure. But knowing that connection that she developed with him as a child was still significant and still valuable to her, and that she wanted him to know that, just really, it was just beautifully done. I wanted to read you this quote. Perhaps so many journals had piled up in the lighthouse because on some level, most came in time to recognize the futility of language, not just in Area X, but against the rightness of the lived-in moment, the instant of touch, of connection, for which words were such a sorrowful disappointment, so inadequate in expression of both the finite and the infinite. So Area X, as I understand it, is from another world. It's not nature fighting back. It's not nature pushing back like I mentioned in the last book. I'll leave all that in, even though it's ramblings. It is an alien invasion of sorts, coming to terraform our Earth, coming to make it a pristine wilderness, untouched by human grubbiness that's pushed back the beautiful wilderness, but instead creating a world good enough for these aliens that may or may not show up to come and live here. And part of the consequence of that is that who Area X touches, the people that Area X touches, it transforms into a piece of it as well. And it's a million different living, breathing, unique, individual pieces of life, different pieces of Area X that all together harmonize into one thing with one goal, with one breath, despite the many different lives living among it. So that kind of harkens back to the Taurier theory that Whitby gave us in book 2. The idea that looking at each individual little piece of Area X won't give us the full picture, will never give us the answer, but in fact it has to be the total sum that we understand in order to begin to understand what Area X is. I'm so curious what book 4 is gonna do and if I'm gonna understand any of it, because I truly, again, I did just finish book 3, so maybe when I reflect on it for a few days, I might sound smarter, but I did come out of this book thinking, what did I read? What? There's so many questions that I still have left, and I expected to leave this book with many questions left, but I have so many. Anyway, those are my thoughts. This video goes up tomorrow, so I hope you enjoyed my ramblings. Final thoughts on the trilogy. I kind of gave them at the beginning of this, but final thoughts, what a trip. I think that's a valid summary of how I felt. I think that book 1 still is one of the greatest books I've ever read. Just extraordinary. And then books 2 and 3, what a trip. I don't know what Common Thought is on this trilogy or on the sequels because they are very different from book one and they took me in very different journeys than I expected, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time reading these books. If you've read them, if you understood them better than me, please do chat with me in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Bye.